Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back with more tales from H.P. Lovecraft. Today, for Spooktober, we are reading from Lovecraft a piece called The Street. Let's hop into this here. The Street was written in late 1919, shortly after The White Ship. Although superficially a realistic story, it may also reveal the influence of Lord Dunsany, particularly the war parables in Tales of War in 1919. Lovecraft noted that the story was inspired by the Boston police strike, which lasted from September 8, 1919, until well into October. Lovecraft's own tale is a somewhat xenophobic allegory about the overrunning of America by seditious immigrants, and therefore does not rank high in his output. It is first published in The Wolverine, December 1920. There be those who say that things and places have souls, and there be those who say they have not. I dare not say myself, but I will tell of the street. Men of strength and honor fashioned that street, stood valiant men of our blood who had come from the blessed isles across the sea. At first it was but a path trodden by bears of water from the woodland spring to the cluster of houses by the beach. Then the more men came to the growing cluster of houses and looked about for places to dwell. They built cabins along the north side, cabins of stout oaken logs with masonry on the side toward the forest, for many Indians lurked there with fire arrows, and in a few years more men built cabins in the south side of the street. Up and down the street walked grave men in conical hats, who most of the time were carried muskets or fowling pieces. And there were also their bonneted wives and sober children. In the evening, these men had with their wives and children would sit about gigantic hearths and read and speak. Very simple were the things of which they would read and spoke, yet things which gave them courage and goodness and helped them by day to subdue the forest and till the fields. And the children would listen and learn of the laws and deeds of the old and of that dear England which they had never seen nor could not remember. There was war, and therefore no more Indians troubled the street. The men busy with labor waxed prosperous and as happy as they knew how to be, and the children grew up comfortably, and more families came from the motherland to dwell on the street. And the children's children and the newcomers' children grew up. The town was now a city, and by one the cabins gave place to houses, simple, beautiful houses of brick and wood, and the stone steps and the iron railings and fanlights over the doors. No flimsy creations were these houses, nor they were, for they were made to serve many a generation. Within there were carven mantels and graceful chairs and sensible, pleasing furniture, china and silver brought from the motherland. So the street drank in the dreams of the young people and rejoiced as its dwellers became more graceful and happy. Where once there had only been strength and honor, taste and learning now abode as well. Books and paintings and music came to their houses, and the young men went to the university, which rose above the plain to the north. In the place of conical hats and muskets, there were three-cornered hats and small swords, and lace and snowy periwigs. For there were cobblestones over which clattered many a bloodied horse and rumbled many a gilded coach, and brick sidewalks with horse blocks and hitching posts. There were in that street many trees, elms and oaks and maples of dignity, so that in the summer the scene was all soft verdure and twittering bird song, and behind the houses were walled rose gardens with hedged paths and sundials, where at evening the moon and the stars would shine bewitchingly, while fragrant blossoms glistened with dew. And so the streets dreamed on, past wars, calamities, and changes. Once most of the young men went away, and some never came back. That was when they furled the old flag and put up a new banner of stars and stripes. But though men talked of great changes, the street felt them not, for its folk were still to blame, speaking of the old familiar things in the old familiar accents. And the trees still sheltered singing birds, and at evening the moon and stars looked down upon dewy blossoms in the walled rose gardens. In time there were no more swords, three-cornered hats, or periwigs in the street. Now how strange seemed the dozens in their walking sticks, tall beavers and cropped heads. New sounds came from the distance, first strange puffings and shrieks from the river a mile away, and then many years later strange puffings and shrieks and rumblings from the other direction. The air was not quite so pure as before, but the spirit of the place had not changed. The blood and soul of the people were as the blood and soul of their ancestors who had fashioned the street. Nor did the spirit change when they tore open the earth to lay down strange pipes, or when they set up tall posts bearing weird wires. There was so much ancient lore in that street that the past could not easily be forgotten. Then the days of evil, when many who had known the street of old knew it no more, and many knew it who had not known it before. And those who came were never as those who went away, for their accents were coarse and strident, and their mien and faces unpleasing. Their thoughts, too, fought with the wise, just spirit of the street, so that the street pined silently as its houses fell into decay, and its streets died one by one, and its rose gardens grew rank with weeds and waste. But it felt a stir of pride one day when again marched forth young men, some of whom never came back. These young men were clad in blue. With the years, worse fortune came to the streets. Its trees, we all gone now, and its rose gardens were displaced by the backs of cheap, ugly new buildings on parallel streets. Yet the houses remained, despite the ravages of the years and the storms and worms, for they had been made to serve many a generation. New kinds of faces appeared in the street, swarthy, sinister faces, with furtive eyes and odd features, whose owners spoke unfamiliar words and placed signs in known and unknown characters upon most of the musty houses. Push carts crowded the gutters. A sordid, undefinable stench settled over the place, and the ancient spirit sleeps. Great excitement once came to the street. War and revolution were singing across the seas. A dynasty had collapsed, and its degenerative subjects were flocking with dubious intent to the western land. Many of these took lodgings in the battered houses that had once been the songs of birds and the scent of roses. Then the western land itself awoke and joined the motherland in her titanic struggle for civilization. Over the cities once more floated the old flag, companioned by the new flag, and by a plainer yet glorious tricolor. But not many flags floated over the street, for therein flooded only fear and hatred and ignorance. Again young men went forth, but not quite as did the young men of those other days. Something was lacking in the sons of those young men of other days, who did indeed go forth in olive drab, with the true spirit of their ancestors, went from distant places and knew not the street and its ancient spirit. Over the seas there was a great victory and the triumph. Most of the young men returned. Those who had lacked something lacked it no longer, yet did fear and hatred and ignorance still brood over the street. For many had stayed behind, and many strangers had come from a distant place to the ancient houses, and the young men who had returned dwelt there no longer. Swarthy and sinister with most of the strangers, yet among them one might find a few faces like those of the old-fashioned, of those who fashioned the street and molded its spirit, like and yet unlike, but there was in the eyes of all a weird, unhealthy glitter as of greed, ambition, and vindictiveness, or misguided zeal. Unrest and treason were abroad amongst the evil few who plotted to take the western land, to strike the western land its death blow, that they might mount to power over its ruins, even as the assassins had mounted in that unhappy frozen land from whence most of them had come. And the heart of the plotting was in the street. Those crumbling houses teemed with alien markers of discord and echoed with plans and speeches of those who yearn for the appointed day of blood, flame, and crime. Of the various odd assemblages in the street, the law said much, but could prove little. With great diligence did men of the hidden badges linger and listen about such places as Petrovich's Bakery, the squalid Rifkin School of Modern Economics, the Circle Social Club, and the Liberty Cafe. There congregated sinister men in great numbers, yet always was their speech guarded as in a foreign tongue, and still the old houses stood, and with their forgotten lore of nobler departed centuries of sturdy colonial tenants and dewy rose gardens in the moonlight. Sometimes a lone poet or traveler would come to view them and would try to picture them in their vanished glory. Yet of such travelers and poets there were not many. The rumor now spread widely that the houses contained the leaders of the vast band of terrorists who had on a designated day were to launch an orgy of slaughter for the extermination of America and all the fine traditions which the street had loved. Handbills and papers fluttered with filth about filthy gutters. Handbills and papers printed in many tongues and in many characters, yet all bearing messages of crime and rebellion. In these writings, the people were urged to tear down the laws and virtues that our fathers had exalted, to stamp on the soul of the old America, the soul that was bequeathed through 1,500 years of Anglo-Saxon freedom, justice, and moderation. It was said that the swart men who dwelled in the street and congregated in its rotting edifices were the brains of a hideous revolution. That at their word of command, many millions of brainless, besotted beasts would stretch forth their noisome talons from the slums of 1,000 cities, burning, slaying, and destroying till the land of our fathers should be no more. All this was said and repeated, and many looked forward in dread to the 4th day of July, about which the strange writings hinted much, yet could nothing be found to place the guilt. None could tell just whose arrest might cut off the damnable plotting at its source. Many times came bands of blue-coated police to search the shaky houses, though at least they ceased to come, for they too had grown tired of law and order and had abandoned all the city to its fate. Then men in olive drab came, bearing muskets, till it seemed that as if in its sad sleep the street must have some haunting dreams of those days. Then musket-bearing men in conical hats walked along from the woodland spring to the cluster of the houses by the beach. Yet could no act be performed to check on the impending cataclysm, for the swart, sinister men were old in cunning. So the street slept uneasily on, till one night there gathered in Petrovich's Bakery and the Rifkin School of Modern Economics, and the Circle Social Club and Liberty Cafe, and in other places as well, vast hordes of men whose eyes were big with horrible triumph and expectation. Over hidden wires, strange messages traveled, and much was said of still stranger messages yet to travel. But most of this was not guessed till afterward, when the western land was safe from peril. The men in olive drab could not tell what was happening, or what they thought to do, for the swart, sinister men were skilled in subtlety and concealment. And yet the men in olive drab will always remember that night, and will speak of the street as to tell of it to their grandchildren, for many of them were sent here there toward morning on a mission unlike that which they had expected. It was known that this nest of anarchy was old, and that the houses were rotting from the ravages of the years and the storms and the worms. Yet the happening of the summer night a surprise because of the very queer uniformity. It was indeed an exceedingly singular happening, though after all a simple one. For without warning, in one of the small hours beyond midnight, all of the ravages of the years and the storms of the worms came to the tremendous climax, and after the crash there was nothing left standing in the street save two ancient chimneys and part of a stout brick wall. Nor did anything that had been alive come alive from the ruins. A poet and a traveler who came with the mighty crowd that sought the scene still tell odd stories. The poet says that all through the hours before dawn he beheld sordid ruins, but indistinctly in the glare of the arc light that there loomed above the wreckage another picture wherein he could descry moonlight and fair houses and elms and oaks and maples of dignity. And the traveler declares that instead of the place's wanted stench, there lingered a delicate fragrance as of roses in full bloom. But are not the dreams of poets and the tales of travelers notoriously false? There be those who say that the kings and places have souls, and there be those who say they have not. I dare not say myself, but I have told you of the street. Okay. As you can see, this is one of the tales that portrays Lovecraft's racism and xenophobia on display. While he does not come out and distinctly say slurs or anything, he describes them as being greedy, loathsome, less intelligent, but there to conquer. When he speaks of non-European immigrants. And yeah, because he keeps referring to Europe as the homeland. And he talks about all the progress of Anglo-Saxon. Yeah, you can see a lot of the xenophobia on display, the racism and everything. Which it is well known that is who Lovecraft It's part of who he is. You can't. A lot of men, it's hard to really try to dissociate who they are from their works. And yeah, Lovecraft, while a lot of great cosmic horror and everything, yeah, this is one of the racist pieces he wrote. And they do the description. They talk of Native Americans with fire arrows setting fire to the houses when they were made of wood, and then they building the street, building the homes on the other side, and trading hats for tri-corner hats, which is the kind of hats often worn by people in the colonial age just before the revolution in America. They talk of muskets and everything. So you're traveling through time, and then he talks about people having left and come back, and people wearing blues, which Civil War, the Union versus the Confederacy. But they talk of people coming in that speak differently, blah blah blah, and how it changes everything. So again, it's part of that xenophobia, that racism. But he describes, there's a spirit that still sleeps there, and then they talk of men in olive drab, and you think of the military green people wear. So more early 1900s, because this was written, when did they say, 1919? So right after the end of World War I. And then he projects the belief that, all the immigration will destroy the streets, destroy the land. Which is stupid. All I can think of when I'm reading this is the parallels where people nowadays, many of the Trumpist Gestapo thugs, the Trumpist Nazis, they think like this. And you look what they're doing, kidnapping Americans out of buildings, off the streets. It's no longer just about trying to be, ending an immigration problem and thus kidnapping Latin American, Hispanic American people. Anybody they see as a threat, as an enemy. And that story reminds me of that mind set right there. But yeah. We'll go ahead end this episode here. As always, thank you all for watching. Educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing. Ask them to cite their sources. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, later.